Boo!
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we've been away for a while. I've started a new teaching job last year, so I was really busy. I have still stayed in the hobby. I've actually been doing some more competitive painting and I'm building my own armies, but I have shied away from the channel. Now that this is my second year of teaching, I kind of have a little more free time, and I'm going to try to put out a video once a month. So you'll be seeing more of us. So thank you for everyone who stuck around. And now let's get on to the video. Today we're going to be talking about everything gore. We're going to be doing organs, blood pools, blood splatter, flayed skin, all that kind of fun stuff. Now adding a little gore to your models can really help tell a story, but more often than not it ends up being a bit too much. Today I'm going to show you some examples of ways to gross up your models, but more so how to do it in a way that doesn't detract from your main piece. Starting off with organs, there's a few ways you can go about this. You can sculpt them by hand, which is honestly very easy, and exact precision isn't needed when it's all going to be covered in blood. You can start by mixing up some green stuff, rolling it into a tube. You can put little indents with your hobby knife or one of your little shapers, and once it's painted and covered in blood, honestly it'll look great. Alternatively, you can use this tool by Green Stuff World that allows you to make cables, tentacles, and in this case, things that look like intestines. You're just going to choose the appropriate size mold and roll the green stuff between the plates. It's a bit tricky to use at first, but once you get it, it makes life pretty easy. You can change the plates out from bigger to smaller size plates, and you'll get a whole variety of different shapes and options. It's a little pricey, but it's kind of a fun tool. Now when it comes to painting the organs, I tend to use flesh tones. In this case, Vallejo Pale Flesh. I've seen people use pinks before, but honestly, whenever it's fully done, it kind of looks cartoony. But the flesh tones with washes and blood, they tend to look more like real organs. So go ahead and give the organs 2 thin coats of the Vallejo flesh tone. After that's fully dried, you're going to want to use any kind of flesh wash and give that a nice coat. This is going to go into the recesses and add some contrast. Once the wash is done, I'm going to go ahead and put the model in its place on the base of my other model. In this case, you can actually see I'm putting it behind the Terminator. This is because I still want the Terminator to be front and center, and I want this to be just part of the scenery. I don't want it to detract from my actual model. Often when people are doing gore, the focus ends up being only on the gore and the model kind of gets left behind. So I also put this down first before doing any of the next steps, because if I'm going to put blood pools around the model, I kind of want it all cohesive and not doing some blood now, some blood later. With the model super glued down, I'm going to take Citadel's Blood for the Blood God. It's a technical paint, and honestly, it's one of their really great paints. It's going to have a nice gloss to it, so you're going to want to do it after you've varnished your models. And I'm going to put a little pool around the model. I'm not going to go crazy with it because remember, this is a person. They don't have, hundreds of gallons of blood in them. Okay, let's move on to the easiest and most overdone element of gore, blood splatter. Now most people here do some form of wargaming, and blood being present makes total sense. For splatter, I really enjoy using Citadel's technical paint that I used with the pools, Blood for the Blood God. There's 2 ways you can do it. The first method is a method my friend Kevin here at Stay Eating Paint uses on this Iron Hand warrior that I got to play against the other day. Now he does a fine mist spurt with the airbrush. And this is a great way to do it if you have an airbrush. I'd still recommend practicing on a white piece of paper first. But secondly, if you don't own an airbrush, you can just flick it on with a dry brush, and it's a very easy method. When using the dry brush method, go ahead and flick the first amount off onto something else. Don't put it on your model or you're going to spell disaster. You want to make sure, again, the particles are small, and directionally think about where the blood's coming from. Blood's probably not raining down from the sky. It's probably coming from the frontal direction, maybe from a little bit below the model. So the back of the model and the top of the model probably won't have that much blood on it. Now, no matter what method you use, you want to keep the particles really small. Keep in mind the scale of the model. If a drop of blood is the size of a model's head, it's probably going to look a bit weird. Also keep in mind that the direction of the splatter is important. It tells a story with the direction of where it's coming from. Now, if you take a look at Kevin's model, you can see that most of the particles are very small, and you can only really pick them up when you see that glint from the glossiness of the blood. This looks realistic, and there's still a lot of blood on this model, but it's done in a very tasteful way that's not detracting from the model itself. Okay, next up we're going to make skin flaps. Now these can be used if you want to, do some Night Lords or flayed ones kind of things and drape skin over them, or just if one of the models is missing an arm or a leg, kind of to rough it up so it's not just a clean cut line. Now making these couldn't be any easier. What you need is some good old PVA glue, Elmers glue, and something flat to put it on. Go ahead, spread it over the surface, and give it a few hours and let it dry. Once the glue is dry, go ahead and scrape it off. You're going to find it's thin, but it's actually pretty tough. And from here you can cut it to shape, stretch it if you need to, just make it whatever size and shape you need for the project you're working on. Now I recommend placing this on your model before painting it, but in this case I'm just demonstrating how to paint it before shaping it or putting it on a model. You're going to want to use some flesh tones. In this case I'm using a basic flesh tone, but if you want something to look like it's more decayed old flesh, you could do something like Citadel's Rakarth flesh, and you're just going to go ahead and give this 2 thin coats. After the thin coats of basic flesh, I'm using a little bit of that Rakarth flesh on the edges, really watered down, to just take some of the saturation of the skin out of the edges like it's kind of decaying. From here, you can go ahead and add some blood to the edges, some Reikland flesh shade. It's kind of up to you. It's kind of hard to go wrong with it from this point. Now that you've done all the steps, you have a piece of skin that looks pretty realistic. I was actually able to trick my girlfriend into thinking I really messed up my hand, which she then yelled at me for. But I've seen this before done with old Flay 1 models, and they looked fantastic. So whatever you're planning to do with it, if you just take your time, have some fun, add some differentiation into the skin, it's going to look great. Okay, let's talk about bones. Now before we even get into painting bones, let's talk about the thing that's the most annoying thing I ever see when people are doing bones. People just have them hanging out in the open, like all the flesh is decayed off of the skull, but somehow it's not been covered by any dirt. Or even worse, sometimes people have like blood coming out of the skull, like all the flesh has decayed, but yet blood's still coming out of it. So let's just avoid that. If we're doing completely clean skulls, they've been there for a while. Now when it comes to painting the bones, it's pretty straightforward. Go ahead and give the bones 2 thin coats of a tan color, such as Vallejo Khaki or Zandari Dust if you're using Citadel. After it dries, go ahead and give it a heavy wash with Agrax Earthshade or any really dark, strong brown wash. After the wash has completely dried, go ahead and do a heavy dry brush with that tan color again, ensuring to leave the recesses dark. I usually do a top-down brush, making sure you're kind of catching the brow above the eyes and the nose as well. After that, you're going to dry brush it one more time, but this time with something lighter, such as Bone White from Vallejo. You're going to use way less paint, so make sure you wipe off the brush really well, and just make sure you're hitting the top portions, really getting the crown of the head, that brow again, above the nose ridge, maybe the cheekbones. You're not trying to cover the whole skull this time. Lastly, if you want to, you can pick out some of the highest details with pure white. You don't have to do this, but it'll add a little bit more contrast to the model itself. And the last and most important tip of all, if you're going to add a body to your model or gore or anything like that, you have to paint them with the same rigor and care you did with the actual model itself. This commonly means painting 2 models in one, or 1.5 in this case. But with that said, if you don't take the same time on the model on the ground as you did the main model, it's gonna stand out, and not in a good way. And that's why a lot of people tend to not like gore, because 1, it's overdone, or 2, it's kind of just haphazardly done, so it's actually detracting from the model. So remember, if you're gonna do gore, sometimes you're painting 2 models. Okay guys, that's it. Hopefully this video helped you out in some way. All the supplies I used are listed in the description down below. You guys will be seeing more of me soon. I'm going to try to get a video out once a month. Until then, thank you for your time, and take care.